Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Beau. Oh, Beau, that's my name. Genesis 41 is going to be where we're at today. 9 o'clock on the dot today. I mean, man, that's pretty cool that I actually hit the mark. So usually I'm a little off. I'm not, I'd like to be on at 9 all the time, right on the dot, but usually I'm a little, hit or miss when it comes to right on 9. But it's June 23rd. Hope you guys are doing well and enjoying a lot of the soccer that's going on right now at the FIFA World Cup. That is exciting to watch. I know my family really enjoys watching it. So anyway, hope you guys are enjoying it. If you're not, then hey, maybe you're enjoying, who knows, whatever you got going on. Maybe you like the sport of golf. Is that a sport or is it a recreation? I don't know. You can comment on that. Okay, chapter 41. Let's get into it. I love going through the Bible. As you guys know, I didn't grow up going through the Bible, and was very antagonistic towards any kind of, quote, organized religion, we would call it. And growing up very progressive and more with Marxist philosophies in my mind, Christianity was just one of those religions that was the enemy, was kind of the reason why the world was so bad. It's really because of those Christians. And if Christians just were gone, then probably the earth would be a more peaceful place. It was quite a rude awakening when I realized that even us atheistic Marxist progressives from Southern California, that even we're the problem. And that was kind of a meaning I'm part of the problem too. Meaning it wasn't just those Christians that are a mess, but it's everybody. We're all so fallen, so off on many different levels. And we all tend to fight it. We tend to know it, but we tend to fight it, cover it up, try to make our own fig leaves, so to speak, to cover up all of our issues, or what the Bible would call iniquity, meaning we're bent. And this bending of human beings is a spiritual issue. It's one where we spiritually have moved away from the source of our peace, any kind of tranquility, any kind of contentment that is found in our creator. But instead we have looked to things of the earth to feed our flesh, whether it's something that grows from a tree or whether it's a person or, a thing like a house or a car or whatever. It can be anything. But we make those things our gods instead of the true and living God. Anyway, we're in Genesis 41. It says 2 full years later. Full years, meaning here we have Joseph running the jail for 2 years. He is the kind of heading up. He's the warden's right-hand man, taking care of the jail institution of Egypt. He interpreted some dreams, and he has found out that he has this kind of interesting interpretation of dreams. And it's kind of continued with him in his life from the moment he had an initial dream and his brothers got very jealous of him and sold him as a slave to the Ishmaelites. And they sold him to the military commander of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And he worked in that house until there were rape charges trumped on him by the military commander's wife, who wanted Joseph sexually, but he said no. And so she cried rape, and he was sentenced and put in jail. But upon his hard work and effort and administrative skills and giftedness that he had, the warden saw that and started using Joseph as a person who could take care of that jail and the prison. And so it was in that prison that he found 2 more people that approached him that actually worked under the Pharaoh, and he interpreted their dreams. Now, they went on, one of them died, and one of them ended up staying at the right kind of rightful place of the Pharaoh at his service, so to speak. But even though Joseph told him, hey, maybe put in a good word about me, the person never did. And so sometimes people maybe, forget about us. For 2 full years, Joseph now has been waiting. What's going to happen? Sometimes we have to be patient, no doubt. And it says, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. And in his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw 7 more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows of the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy, fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. But he fell asleep again and had a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind. And these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by those dreams. So he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. Today I have been reminded of my failure. Could you imagine in your life, going, really, thinking that maybe, times are going to change. Maybe things are going to look up now. Maybe someone's going to put in a good word for me, and I've been working hard and being diligent and doing all the right things, but it still doesn't seem like I'm making much headway. And you just got to be patient and just wait and wait and wait and be patient. And notice Joseph does this. And finally, that cupbearer who was in the prison, and Joseph helped that cupbearer, he remembers. The cupbearer finally goes, man, I've been reminded of my failure. He told Pharaoh, some time ago, it says you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night, the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant, and everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. Okay, so finally, 2 years later, the cupbearer speaks up to Pharaoh and mentions about the giftedness of Joseph and how he did have a special gift of being able to interpret dreams and say what they really meant. And I love this. A guy who has just a consistent gift like this, he's not only a gifted guy at interpreting dreams, obviously, and what they mean, but he's also a gifted administrator and a hardworking person, young man, and he just stays at it. It makes me think in my devotion, am I like that before my God? Am I a guy who stays consistent and faithful? Am I what I call fat? F-A-T, faithful, available, teachable. Am I those things? Or have I kind of, grown tired in doing good? The Bible tells us to not grow tired in doing good, but in due time we shall reap a harvest, a reward. Just staying faithful, staying available. Hey, am I available to help out at the church? Am I available to do what needs to be done? Am I available to do that grunt work that needs to happen? To be that guy, that's running around, doing the things that need to be done. Am I teachable? I was watching a soccer game the other day, and it was Argentina. Now, they have one of the best players in the world, if not the best player ever in the world, a guy named Messi. And it's funny to watch Argentina play soccer or football, because all the other players, beside the goalie, of course, for Argentina are running around. And they're all super busy. They just run around. But there's one player on Argentina that just kind of walks around. And that is Messi. He kind of walks around and kind of jogs here and jogs there, but, doesn't really do, you don't see him doing much. All the other players on that team are running around. But Messi is just kind of walking around. But then, all of a sudden, something happens. A ball gets passed to him. He finds an open space, and boom, 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 the ball's in the net. It's really unbelievable. But what we learned from it is something really important, and that is not everybody on the team is going to do the same thing. Not everybody in your church is going to look the same. Some people are going to be busy, running around, doing all kinds of stuff. Other people, it's going to seem like they're just walking. It seems like they don't do anything. But when they do something, man, does it shine. It's absolutely amazing. We just have to remember that everybody's got different gifts. Joseph had certain gifts. He had that administrative, that took the initiative kind of guy. A guy who really could see what needed to be done and really stepped into those places. Well, finally, the cupbearer says to the Pharaoh, this is Pharaoh's cupbearer, a guy who tastes wine for Pharaoh, making sure it's not poison. He says, hey, I forgot to tell you about this really special, hardworking young man, this Hebrew who had this gift. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. You got to look good when you're going to the king. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it. It is beyond my power to do this, Joseph replied, but God can tell you what it means and set you at ease. Now, I love that answer, and I find this really cool because Joseph doesn't have this cocky attitude of oh yeah, I got the power, I can do whatever I want to do. Oh yeah, da. Instead, he says, hey, I don't have that kind of power, but God does. Meaning God knows the end from the beginning. God knows, what that means. I'm just going to seek the Lord. And I think that's a cool thing to do and a great place to be at. That when people come to you with things that are just, hard, who knows? I don't know what the answer is, But you know what? God does. And so we can go to God and we can talk to God about it and we can seek the Lord on that answer. I find that very important in our lives. Many times we want to hear from human beings when really it's not human beings that we need to hear from. Who we need to hear from and what we need conviction on is something from the Holy Spirit, from the Spirit of the living God. That if we hear from the Spirit of the living God, boy, that's going to really rock our world. That's going to change our lives. But what I might hear from a human being is not going to be so, be okay. And I love that. Joseph says, hey, me, I don't know. I don't know much, but God knows. I love that. Joseph knew where his giftedness came from. It came from the Lord. And that's really what we want to do, is bring glory to God with whatever gifts, whatever things that God gives us, crowns, so to speak, whatever crowns he gives us. We just want to lay back at his feet. It says, so Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. In my dream, he said, I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. But then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them, and I never seen such sorry-looking animals in the land of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows, but afterward you wouldn't have known it, for they were still as thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. What a weird dream. God, kind of spooky. And in my dream I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted, shriveled, and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed the 7 healthy heads. And I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean. So here we see that Pharaoh already has magicians. This will come up later on in the events surrounding a guy named Moses. But here we see that they failed to really help out Pharaoh in any way. And so he goes to Joseph. And Joseph responded, both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain withered by the east wind represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what is about to do. What he is about to do, what God is about to do. Interesting. God over all things. It's interesting. The God of the Bible is over all. I have to trust that God is over all, in control of all, omniscient, omnipotent. You might have heard those words before. But here you see Joseph, all the way back thousands and thousands of years ago, has this idea in his brain. This is what God's about to do. And he says that there will be prosperity in the land of Egypt for 7 years. But after that, there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God, and he will soon make them happen. Interesting. He says, you have similar dreams. There's something God's trying to speak to you on. That's very cool. Perhaps you've had some dreams before and you go, man, I think God's trying to get my attention on something. It keeps kind of coming up and coming up and coming up. I've had some dreams like that before, and I found that one of them had to do with a lot of fear that I had in my life. That I kept having this same reoccurring dream. It actually was a reoccurring dream over and over. And I had it for years. It was very interesting. It wouldn't happen every night, but every so often I would get this same reoccurring dream. And I really had to ponder, what was this about? I never knew. But as I came to know the Lord and reading his word, I saw that there was a lot of biblical passages that dealt with our fear. Don't fear. Don't be afraid. And I would read those passages and I go, man, that dream would pop in my mind of like, man, that is a dream that keeps coming back and it's about fear. It's about me being afraid. And I could see that, man, that was something that was very scriptural. It was in the Bible. And that's what I mean. If you have dreams that happen, you got to look for them in the Word, meaning does it concur with already the revelation of God? Look for that. If you have something that keeps occurring, say, hey, God, what are you trying to say to me? Can you find passages in the Bible that speak to that particular subject matter or that issue? And what does the Word say about that? And so, therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge. It says after Joseph, tells the Pharaoh the dream, it says, therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. So this is what Joseph is telling Pharaoh because of the famine that's going to take place. The Pharaoh should appoint superiors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it into Pharaoh's storehouses. Store it away and guard it there so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come into the land of Egypt. Otherwise, this famine will destroy the land. I love this. There's a preparation here that's given by Joseph to Pharaoh. Hey, because of this, why don't you prepare? God is giving you an insight into this, but why don't you prepare for this famine? Now, this famine is going to affect the Hebrew people. And so you can see God is sustaining this area and preparing it for the Hebrew nation to grow and to flourish in the land of Egypt before moving into the promised land. That's what's going to happen. And that's the big picture of how God is moving here. But I think in my devotion, it makes me think, am I prepared? Do I prepare? Am I investing properly? Am I doing the right things, financially, with the things that I own? Am I neglecting saving, preparing? Nothing's wrong with those things, is being ready. Nothing's wrong with getting that big 50-gallon of water and making sure it's available for your family if they ever need it, or whatever it is that you need to get. Some people get a Berkey system at the house, or some people get this, or some people get, some food, some perishables, I guess you would call them, and keep them on hand. I grew up in SoCal where earthquakes, man, we had a lot of earthquakes. And I remember my mom always storing stuff, always telling us kids, man, this is where it is. This is where you go. This is what happens if we're out of this and out of that. And it was kind of cool that you could see there was a preparation there. And so it's not wise when calamity is going to come and you do absolutely nothing, right? And you just say, well, hey, whatever, not so much. There's a preparation that needs to take place. We need to be prepared. And it might look different, meaning not everybody's got the same resources, so not everybody's going to do the same thing. But in our own individual hearts and minds, we need to take action in some way, right? To be wise with what God has given to us, to steward over, to be prepared for what goes on in our land too. I think there's some cool things there. For sure. So it says Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Man, this guy had such a wonderful knack to give God glory, to shine God, to speak boldly in God's name. That it obviously shined forth. This is definitely a let your light so shine moment in Joseph. And it says, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else has an intelligence or wise as you are. Now, remember, this is not far removed from even the Tower of Babel. It is removed from it. Don't get me wrong. There is some years and years and years that have gone by. But there's a remnant of people all over the world at this time that understand who the true and living God is. There is certainly a distortion that has already taken place of the false worship of gods. So I'm not saying that everybody knows the true and living God, but there is a kind of a remnant of yeah, they're, okay, the true and living God. Hey, I've heard of this before, because remember, everybody's from Shem, Ham, or Japheth. And that's the tribal lines of everybody. And so, we're all in a sense related, and all these people are in a sense related. But over time, there's been a losing of the knowledge of the true and living God. It gets more distorted and more distorted and more distorted. And just think what AI is going to do, right? Right, where me and my wife were talking about this, where you're going to have no longer is worship music going to be actually people, or it's not going to be written by people that are born again. It's just going to be all machine. People are going to think it's written by probably human beings, but it's not. You're going to have sermons that are AI, everything. Could you imagine? I mean, talk about distortions, right? Is this what God intended? Sounds much more like the false prophet of the book of Revelation and the image that is able to speak, right? Causing the image of the beast to speak. Woo, sounds very like our day. And he says, you will be in charge of my court, verse 40, and all the people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than you. Joseph is going to be exalted to the vice president of Egypt, the second in command, if you will. He was in already the political world as the kind of right-hand man to the military commander of Egypt. And then he got thrown in the pokey on that rape charge. And then now he's going to be at the right hand of Pharaoh. Wow, right? In a political position. Is it okay for people to be in political positions? Is it okay for, people that believe in the true and living God to be in political positions? Well, it's kind of neat to go through the Bible and see those that are in political positions, right? Wow, Joseph, one of them, is going to be put in a political position in Egypt, And it says, then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zephanath-Paneah, which means God speaks and lives. He also gave him a wife whose name was Asenath, and she was the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On. Whoa. Other versions, the Greek version, so the Septuagint reads, instead of On, Heliopolis. I don't know if you needed to know that or not. It says, so Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt, and he was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh. Hey, just like Jesus, starts his ministry around that time too, that age. Here Joseph begins his political career at the age of 30, at Pharaoh's right hand anyway. And it says, and then Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and he inspected the entire land of Egypt. So Joseph, if you saw him in these days, he would be all over the land, navigating what was going on in the land, seeing what was happening all over. He was on his jet plane, going from here to there, inspecting, seeing what was happening, having meetings with people, seeing what was going on, how's the revenues happening. I mean, this guy, Joseph, was quite the business guy, quite an amazingly knowledgeable person, very savvy, very understanding how money obviously works, and really went at it. I think that's cool. There's all different people in the body of Christ. There's people that understand money better than other people. There's people that know how to make money work for you instead of you having to, work for your money all the time. And that's true. I've met people like that. I have a fiduciary. I don't know if you know what that is, but I have one of those people in my life. And boy, are they amazing. It's great to get with them and talk with them and help. And they help you. They help your family. They help, again, money work for you. So, man, it's neat. And they're believers in the Lord. They love Jesus. And I just find that there's all different types of people in the body. Again, not everybody's a Messi on Argentina, right? Not everybody's that guy. Everybody's got their, thing to do. But I think it's a good thing in my Devo to just think about God, let me find those right people, those people that I can connect with, that love you, that love your word, but also how these different kind of sets of giftedness that could help me. And so as predicted, the 7 years of land produced bumper crops. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain like on the sand of the seashore. Finally, he stopped keeping records because there was too much to measure. During this time, so he was an accountant too. He was a bookkeeper. It says, during this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God had made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Now remember, the Pharaoh gave Joseph a wife, and she was Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. Wow. Joseph had an interesting, bride. You might go, well, they're not too yoked, Man, it's amazing what you might think being yoked is or what it isn't. Sometimes, I have seen 2 Christians get married and they're not very yoked, meaning they're not very grooving together. They're not on the same page. Even though they both say they know Jesus, it doesn't seem like they really got it together at all, They just don't sense each other. They're not working hand in hand together and in unity, but here it's working. Joseph named his older son Manasseh. Now this doesn't give people, I think, the carpet launch to go and just, hey, I'm going to marry whoever I want to marry and that kind of thing. I mean, let's just, when we read the New Testament, it's very clear. Hey, you'll marry, but marry in the Lord. But I guess my point is that, sometimes you got to really make sure that you're yoked. You're yoked together, meaning you're really in unity. You're really on the same page, and that's something that takes some time. Don't be in a rush. Make sure you're on the right page. You guys both love the Lord. It's really clear, give it the time that's needed. Let those testings happen and see people persevere. Make sure it's the right person, for sure. And so Manasseh's born. God had made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. Joseph really has taken to this new life. You can see it in his sons' names. Hey, he made me forget all my troubles, all the troubles of my family. Isn't it weird when we leave and cleave? Sometimes we can really develop a new life. I mean, that's really cool. When you leave and cleave, you get married and you move on. And sometimes you can now do things, a different way than maybe you were grown up or brought up. Maybe the way you were brought up wasn't that good. And now you have an opportunity to kind of do something amazing. Bob says premarital counseling is essential. Oh man, it is very important, very good for you, to sit down with a pastor, an elder, a deacon in a church, and really just go over the Bible and what the Bible teaches about marriage and subjects that surround marriage. It says, at last 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries. But throughout Egypt there was plenty of food. Eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians. So now they have a warehouse and they have a distribution plant going on. And Joseph has been preparing for this. He organized this, and he has a company that's going to distribute all the food that has been stored, all the grain. And it says the famine was severe. And the people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world. Wow. God takes one person and through these gifts that God gives him, and his own diligence, right? His diligence to just do it, and his courage to step out in faith, right? With the gifts that God gives him. Hey, God's given me a gift. I'm going to step out in faith and do it. I'm not going to hide it under a bushel basket. I'm not going to just sit in the church and do nothing. I am going to go and use my gifts. What is my gifts? I'm going to go do it. God takes that courage and gives that courage. But Joseph goes, someone might look at a wonderful garden and say, hey, oh man, God really blessed you with this wonderful garden. But you might say to that person who's saying that, hey, yeah, but I also picked up a rake. Meaning, yeah, God blesses, but I also put my hand to the plow, Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, right? Work it out. That's what we're to do. Take action, work it out, knowing it's God who works and wills according to his good pleasure, meaning it's God who works and wills in me. So what is it? Is it me doing it or is it God doing it? The answer is both. Both is going on. And we see this in Joseph's life. Does he credit God for the work? Absolutely. I can't interpret dreams, but God can. But yet we see that Joseph is a diligent man, and he's a courageous man, and he takes steps of faith. What a cool thing to take a step of faith, to do something crazy. Man, I'm going to go help a church over here. I'm going to go do this over there. I'm going to do this Bible study over here. I'm going to jump over there. I'm going to do some music over here. I'm going to go in there, and I'm going to outreach over here, and I'm going to step out. And boy, man, do you see fruit in all these different places. Wow, I can't believe this happened in this, in that, in this. And oh man, I've been so richly blessed to see so many amazing things happen in all over, not only my city, but other places that we have ventured off into. And God, I just thank the Lord for the opportunities and the gifts that he's given me, but also the faith that he's given me to trust in him. And I also thank my parents for the diligence, man, the heart to be diligent. My mom especially, just saying, you got to work hard, man. You got to go at it, and that diligent example. Boy, all those things working together, God does the work and he gets all the glory, of course. So, man, it's really, really cool and just unbelievable. So Joseph's, a guy who's, boy, we would just be like, wow, what a documentary, all the ups and downs. I mean, God, could you really overcome that rape charge in his life? Oh, can he overcome that? And then you see that, man, within time and his faithfulness, man, he just gets exalted to the right spot. And you know how you know it's the right spot? Because Joseph, through his faithfulness, there is a love and a blessing to people. He is blessing people. He's prepared to bless people. And I love that. When God's doing that work in our life, it should look like an outflow of loving your neighbor. It should look like the outflow of loving your neighbor. I mean, that's great. Okay, so that's Genesis 41. Woo, what a cool one, learning about Joseph. Hey, you guys have a great day, okay? Thanks for joining me on the devotion for today. Take care. Bye-bye.